Okay, so here we go, designing stable profits with regenerative agriculture. Um, this is a follow-up to the webinar that we ran the other night. So um, this is a project funded through RANT and the Australian Government's National Land Care program, sort of um, for smart farms, or is it Farm Smart? Sorry, Farm Smart. Um, and the project's been auspiced by Gecko, and this is some of the other things that I do. I'm a member of RANT, um, and it's kicking goals all over Tasmania and starting to on the mainland as well. I'm also manage Stiper Native Grasses, which is a not-for-profit charity. There's been some contribution from NRM South in southern Tasmania, and that's just my logo for my training and training and consulting business. So designing stable profits with regenerative agriculture. This is sort of driven by what we did at the rant, the rant, sorry, the rant conference in Launceston, where we were talking about what's a valid definition for regenerative agriculture. And so what came up was that one of the ideas that I'd had was that it was that intersection of that people, land, and profit. There's nothing new in that, but I wanted it to be actually auditable. So um, make sure that you can go onto any property and say, yes, it is definitely regenerating. So with the people scores, we've got high wellbeing scores. That's based on work done by Sue Ogilvie and Mark Gardner with a project they did for the Department of Environment, and I can actually send you a copy if you'd like on that. So, and actively promoting agriculture, that was a bit I added after. I did some work with Sydney University, and we were interviewing, doing structured interviews with farmers during the drought around southern New South Wales. And the people that weren't going well and were really struggling a bit were actively, well, they would say things to me like the best thing is that the kids don't want to be farmers. So, which I found sort of a bit devastating. But there was other people that were going well, that were managing their stocking rate, had systems in place and processes, that they were still actively promoting agriculture. So they were setting it up so that the kids had a job if they wanted to, and they were actively promoting agriculture to others. So with the land, and I tend to focus on, as most people know, on planned grazing, regenerative grazing, that uh, the definition of that is, and it's auditable, is that it's increasing in landscape function. So that's David Tongway and Norm Hindley's landscape function analysis, which I've got a slide up later, and also increasing in biodiversity, both above ground and below ground. So, and how do we do that at a low cost, low risk, profitable way? So that brings us to that third ring, and that's the profit's got to be stable or increasing. So um, this 3 workshop series that will follow this webinar is all about how do you design a profitable regenerative grazing or cropping or farming system. So the focus is really in on that profit. Um, the other night I quickly went through this, that sort of agribusinesses and banks are tending to capture all the income and farmers are left over with not much. What that's called is the declining terms of trade. But what we found is that it's possible to turn that around. So the key thing out of this was that over the last 30 something years, Canadian farmers, for each dollar of sales they've made, they've kept 2 cents in the dollar, and agribusiness and banks have kept the rest. So it needs a redesign. It needs to, I was pretty harsh about sort of agribusiness and how it's sort of like the parasite sucking the life out of farmers. So how do we design around it? So I've also included just a quick Australian net farm income. I need to update this. I got this from Ben Rees, um, and it basically shows that it's a very similar situation. It's just that figure, that net value of farm production, the blue line, is not as bad as the Canadian one, but that's because it sort of doesn't have a lot of that interest and tax in it. So the green line is the value of what people are producing. So that's continually going up, debt's going berserk, and farmers aren't keeping much. So just to set the scene, just a few, that the position isn't good, and that it's basically a design that doesn't work, and we need to redesign it into regenerative agriculture that's more profitable, more stable, and more resilient. So I really like this work done by Dr. Tim Hutchings. Tim, for his succession plan for the farm, went and did a PhD on risk in agriculture. And I was lucky to sit with him on a flight from Wagga to Melbourne once, and got to know him talking about that, and then followed it up and read his PhD and did all that sort of stuff. But the key message here is you've got to eliminate the losses. So the problem with agriculture is it fails too much. If you focus on maximizing production, or even having a production focus, you tend to intensify the business. And as you intensify the business, you increase the risk. And I'll come back to this, but the risks are basically debt number one, then rainfall, then market price. So, and it's these accumulated losses which threaten the farm business survival and growth. So it's about, how do I eliminate losses? So how, if it's a grazing enterprise, how do you never run out of grass? So, you know, like, and I quote Bud Williams, you know, it's impossible to go broke with having too much grass and too much money in the bank, but you can go broke really quickly if you've got too many animals at the wrong time. And how do you put systems into that? And that's what we'll be talking about. This is just some New South Wales DPI data showing that over this period, and it was a pretty tough time, 98 to 2013, that dual purpose sheep were more profitable than cropping and prime lamb, than beef and wool. When you have a look in this report, it's also a bit scary that the dual purpose sheep weren't making a lot of money, but they were more profitable than the cropping. And the problem is that cropping has too many failures. There's too many times you don't make any money, barely get your bake back, and there's other times that you make a big loss and they suck the profit out of the business. So I have a real, sorry about that. I have a real design that slow and steady wins the race. So all my training and advice is based around that. How do you make sure that in 10 years' time, you've got more money in the bank than what you have now? So one of the things we'll be doing is, what profit do you actually need in the business? And this is really, can be sort of positive or negative for people, but I think it's good to know just how big the gap is between what you're doing at the moment and how profitable that is versus what the target needs to be. I could work with a lot of people where the farm seems to be a black hole, sucking all the time and money out of people. So, you know, how do we design around that? So I keep doing, you know, how big is the gap between your current profit and what you need in the future to make the business resilient and stable. We'll be covering things like, what's your logjam? So your personal logjam. Now, here's a few things that I found is that bookkeeping tends to be an early logjam and pretty easy to fix. So to make steady, stable profits that, you know, you've made by taking corrective action against the profitable plan, you actually need to have good data very early in the month. So that's really easy to get nowadays. So within that, you know, first week of the month, you need to get the data, work out what worked, what didn't, and what corrective action. Have a meeting, discuss what that is. But you can't do it without that information. I found this out that I had a stint working in London, and each week we would get um, most of the world. We were selling chemicals around the world. We'd get the condition and whether you'd made your profits and your tonnages and everything around the world, but we didn't do the crunching of the numbers. We sat there and decided what to do. So I found that really easy. So um, I've been working with people. So have you got a good bookkeeping system in place? If you're doing it yourself, you need to sit down and do the bookkeeping one day and then next day do the management meeting, so that you're not sort of trying to swap hats, because I find that people are still back in the numbers and they're not thinking about the future. Time to plan a profit, having those meetings, getting the infrastructure you need on the farm, and making sure that you're not continuing patterns or other things that we'll come into and make sure that we discuss. So that patterns is really just sort of, have you got the right design for your agricultural enterprises? Are you carving at the right time? You know, are you actually making decisions about what you're going to plant at the right time? So just trying to break those patterns. The other, the other really profound idea I find for working out where you need to focus your time and effort is working on this financial weak link, and we'll make sure that everyone in the training has got their main enterprises have identified what do they actually need to do and what part of the business do they need to work at it on. Because I told a story the other night about a friend of mine, Michael, had live weight scales um, uh, down near Haywood, and we used to talk about how did he make more money out of it. So basically, what it was ones and twos were coming in and being consolidated on a truck, and Michael would pay the people at the time and sort of weigh them, uh, work out what their dressing percentage was, estimate their dressing percentage, and then pay them against the current grid. These were some of the things as we were sitting around that we found that, you know, the yards needed more work, they needed to be bigger, the road got muddy in the middle of winter, um, and some of the product issues were, you know, spending time filling out vendor decks for people. I felt that it was a bit like some sort of meeting place. People really like to hang around. I thought we could make more money put in a coffee machine, and we had all the grids that the from the over the hooks grids from the abattoirs to maintain confidence, and had to make it really clear that this was the grid they were being sold on. This was the dressing percentage estimated, and this was, you know, the percentage for transport and sort of running the yards. And people were really happy if that was really made explicit. And it was very cold in winter, cold, wet, and lonely. The marketing issues was, and this was what Michael came up with, was there was not enough people know where we are, so you know, know we are here. So, and the story was that you know, a farmer brought in a pet Simmental steer that was just so big it was too heavy for the scales. I'd been working in the abattoir, so I was thinking practically this thing wouldn't fit through any abattoir that I knew. And it was too big and too long. It'd be dragging around on the floor. And for the hygiene, you'd have to cut all the forequarter off it. And I was thinking if we put that in the abattoir at Portland, which was an old abattoir, it'd pull the rails out of the roof. It was so big. So even split as a half, it would still be too heavy and it'd be above the safe working load for the abattoir. So I'm going, oh, don't buy it. Whereas Michael immediately thought, oh, this is the marketing that I need. He rang the Portland Observer, and while we were waiting for the photographer to come out, the owner said, "Oh, you can sit on him if you want." And so Michael asked him, "Oh, will you sit on him to get the photo?" And he said, "Oh no, he's wet from the rain. I'll get wet trousers." So it ended up that Michael was sitting on the Simmental steer, and so that was on the front page of the Portland Observer one week, and the next week it was on the front page of the Victorian Weekly Times. So the business really grew from there, about tripled immediately for no money down, really, just focusing on and realising that Arbuckle, which was the name of the steer, was the great marketing opportunity. So it's things like that that we'll be doing. You really need to know this is where I'll be focusing my effort. And and basically, it's that line that's at the bottom there. The key to generating wealth is not in the things you sell, but in how you reinvest the money earned. So that's what we'll be focused on. Where do I need to put my effort and time and money so that I actually make this business flow better, so that you can increase the amount of dollars that you're capturing out of the business. So that can be really profound. Most people do it quite intuitively. I'm not good at it. I find that I need I need someone else to think about it for me, because I have a thing that if I could see it, I would have already addressed it. So it actually almost can hide a bit from you. So that needs to be done. So addressing the weak link, it's got to be addressed for the business to be more profitable and stable. And then you've got to work out how to do it. And then you've got to make sure you allocate the time and money. Another very important thing, this is from Alan Savory's work, that we have a tendency to let expenses rise to income. So we'll just be planning that you take the profit first. So pay yourself first and tighten your belt around the expenses. There's a lot of research showing as prices drop or seasons get tougher, that expenses, the belt always goes hard round the expenses, and then as the seasons and the prices get better, then the belts gradually loosen. So this is really just a way of making sure that you've got the belt as tight as you can. So it's about efficiency. And it's about doing that hard work, getting lower insurance, less fuel, all those other things. So, and then Alan's a real belt and braces sort of a guy. He always wants at least a couple of ways of catching people to make sure that they've thought about things. So this is prioritizing expenses. So we prioritize them as wealth generating, inescapable, and maintenance expenses. So the wealth generating produce new money into the business, and usually targeted at the weak link or the log jam. So that's how do you get new money in. Inescapable, you need to pay. The maintenance are really all other expenses, wages and living. So we'll help people go through that. So the maintenance, by labeling important things like wages and living expenses, maintenance, it seems to free up people to reduce them, which is really important, sort of, because then any of that money that you've reduced there can go back into the wealth generating expenses, which actually acts as a virtuous cycle and winds your profit up. I spoke at length about this the other night. So this is sort of quotes out of increasing profitability. I have a real thing that if people talk to you about production, be very afraid. So if they're talking about increasing your grass or increasing your crop or increasing your how much you produce, then usually that carries more rainfall risk and will actually end up damaging the business. So this was out of Paul Bethune's Nuffield Scholarship, and he spoke at the Grasslands conference in South Australia in 2006. But just overcapitalising and plant and machinery increases the cost of production and increases risk. So the business doesn't make as much profit. He was a dairy farmer, so he went and studied what are the most profitable dairy farms do, and he came back with that conclusion: the higher the proportion of the total diet is consumed as grass, the lower the production cost, the more profitable they are. So that's really important, because I don't see any research that says the opposite to that. All the research shows, New Zealand research, Australian research, everywhere in the world, the more grass that the dairy cows eat, the lower the production cost and higher the profit. But the industry seems to be going the other way. So it's been trying to increase numbers, ends up being overstocked, and then ends up making less money by increasing risk. So the other one is from Paul McKenzie from WA. Maximum profit is at 80% of maximum production due to the law of diminishing returns. So, like I worked at the DPI in Hamilton in Southwest Victoria, and I used to say to the scientists when I wanted to stir them up was that, if you shake a tree, you get 80% of the fruit off very easily. To get the last 20%, you've actually got to shake it that hard, you kill the tree. And I think of that as that sort of 80-20 rule for, you know, for it fits for most things. I was just thinking about other stuff then. But then, you know, that at least 80% of maximum production. So we confuse maximum production with maximum profit. And we need to get back and find out where is maximum profit, not maximum production. Most cropping places are cropping areas that they shouldn't be, and overcropping too high a percentage of the farm, which exposes it to too much risk. Most grazing enterprises, so dairy, beef and sheep, are overstocked, and actually lowering their profit because they're over that optimum for profit. And I'll be providing references and how to sort that out on your place as well. Grazing enterprises are most profitable, I say, when they're really below their stocking, you know, below their carrying capacity. They've got to be understocked to regenerate the land, and they've also got to be understocked to be the most profitable they can be, especially where you have a rainfall risk. And that was what Tim Hutchings' research showed, was that if you had a rainfall risk, then being overstocked reduced the profit in the business. So there's 3 workshops, and they'll be recorded if you can't make the actual times. But there is what comes with this workshop schedule is that we will be able to, with the funding that we've got, we will be able to make sure that we're going through your individual homework, making sure we provide one-on-one doing all that sort of work to make sure that you come out the other end with a profitable plan, and you know how to monitor and manage it to make sure that you get your profits at the end of the year. So there is a cost. So $120 for non-members, $80 for members, and $30 for students. So if you have any questions or that's not clear, just give us a hoy. That's my email and my mobile number. So thanks for your attention, and hope to see you at the workshops.